The galaxy was vast, a swirling tapestry of stars and planets that stretched beyond imagination. Among its countless worlds, none were as feared or revered as Keller, a planet bathed in hues of violet and silver, where the air shimmered with an almost magical energy. Towering crystalline spires rose from the ground like jagged teeth, reflecting light in dazzling patterns. It was here that the Amazari thrived, a warrior race whose very name struck fear into the hearts of even the most hardened alien species. The Amazari lived for battle. Their society revolved around strength, honor, and dominance. Every day was a test of wills, every interaction a challenge to prove oneself worthy. They were born fighters, bred for war since childhood, and their reputation preceded them across the stars. To cross paths with an Amazari meant certain death unless you could match their ferocity, and few ever could. In stark contrast stood humanity. Humans had only recently clawed their way onto the galactic stage, emerging from their tiny blue planet with dreams too big for their fragile bodies. Most other species saw them as amusing oddities, at best weak, clumsy beings who barely understood the technology they scavenged or traded for. At worst, they were mocked openly, dismissed as irrelevant pests unworthy of attention. Even on bustling interstellar markets, humans often found themselves pushed aside by towering aliens who sneered at their small stature and soft voices. Elias Drake was different. He wasn't just any human. He was a merchant with a knack for finding rare treasures. His ship, the Wanderer, was stuffed to the brim with artifacts, trinkets, and strange gadgets collected from dozens of worlds. While others laughed at his attempts to compete in the galaxy's great bazaars, Elias didn't mind. He had learned long ago that being underestimated was sometimes the greatest advantage of all. One fateful day, Elias arrived at the Grand Bazaar of Zirith, a sprawling marketplace famous for attracting traders and collectors from every corner of the galaxy. Stalls overflowed with glowing crystals, ancient weapons, and exotic creatures locked in shimmering force fields. As Elias navigated through the crowded aisles, something unusual caught his eye. A massive, muscular figure chained to a pedestal near the edge of the market. She was unlike anything Elias had ever seen. Her skin gleamed like polished bronze, and her body rippled with muscles honed by years of combat. Her eyes burned with defiance, even as chains bound her wrists and ankles. This was no ordinary prisoner. It was an Amazari warrior, sold into slavery after losing a duel. Around her, alien merchants whispered nervously, unsure whether it was safe to approach such a dangerous creature. Elias felt a pang of pity but also curiosity. What kind of life awaited this proud warrior if she remained enslaved? Would she be forced to fight in gladiatorial arenas for entertainment, or worse, dismantled for her genetic material? Something inside him stirred a mix of empathy and determination. Whatever the cost, he decided then and there that he would buy her freedom. Approaching the auctioneer, Elias kept his expression calm despite the knot of nerves twisting in his stomach. "How much?" he asked simply, nodding toward the Amazari. The alien merchant blinked in surprise. "You're serious?" he scoffed. "Do you even know what you're dealing with? She'll tear you apart before you can blink." "I'll take my chances," Elias replied evenly, sliding a credit chip across the counter. The amount was steep, far more than he'd planned to spend, but he didn't hesitate. The deal was struck, and within moments the chains fell away from the Amazari's limbs. For a moment she simply stood there, staring at him with those fiery eyes. Then, without warning, she lunged forward, not to attack, but to grip his shoulders tightly, her voice low and guttural. "Why did you do this, human?" Elias swallowed hard, meeting her gaze. "Because no one deserves to live in chains," he said quietly. "Not even someone as strong as you." Her expression softened, though confusion lingered. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the Amazari warrior saw not weakness in this small, unassuming human but courage. And so began a journey neither of them could have foreseen, one that would change not only their lives but the fate of entire worlds. As they walked away from the market together, the crowd parted silently, watching in awe. A human had just bought an Amazari warrior, and somehow everyone sensed that this was only the beginning of something extraordinary. The journey back to the Wanderer was tense, though neither Elias nor the Amazari warrior spoke a word. The air between them crackled with unspoken questions and uncertainty. She moved with deliberate precision, her every step radiating power, while Elias tried his best not to seem intimidated. He had freed her from chains, but that didn't mean she trusted him or even liked him. As they boarded the ship, Elias gestured toward one of the passenger seats. "You can sit there," he said cautiously, unsure how she would react. Instead of sitting, however, she folded her arms across her chest and glared at him, her piercing gaze unwavering. "I am called Syra," she said finally, her deep voice echoing through the small cabin. "Who are you?" "Human. Elias Drake," he replied, offering a tentative smile. "Well, I'm just a merchant." Syra's expression hardened. "A merchant buys slaves?" she asked sharply, her tone laced with skepticism. "What game do you play, Elias Drake?" "No game," Elias said quickly, raising his hands in defense. "I don't believe anyone should be owned, not by another person, not by any species. That's why I bought your freedom." Her eyes narrowed further, as if trying to see through his words. "Freedom is meaningless without purpose. What do you expect from me now? Gratitude. Elias hesitated, caught off guard by her directness. I don't expect anything, he admitted. But maybe we can help each other. You're strong, skilled, maybe stronger than anyone I've ever met. And let's just say I could use someone like you. Salra tilted her head slightly, intrigued despite herself. Help you do what? Before Elias could answer, an alarm blared throughout the ship. Red warning lights flashed on the control panel, and the hum of the engines faltered momentarily. Elias rushed to the cockpit, his fingers flying over the controls as he scanned the readouts. What's happening? Salra demanded, stepping up behind him. We've been flagged, Elias muttered grimly. By Keller patrol ships. They must have tracked us after the auction. Silra's jaw tightened. They'll want me back, she said flatly. If they catch me, I won't go quietly. They won't get close enough to try. Elias shot back, determination replacing his earlier nervousness. With practiced ease, he rerouted power to the ship's thrusters and activated the cloaking device, a piece of salvaged tech he'd spent months repairing. As the Keller fighters closed in, the Wanderer shimmered and vanished from sight. For a moment, silence filled the cockpit. Then Syra let out a low chuckle, surprising Elias. You humans always surprise me, she said, shaking her head. So clever, hiding in plain sight when strength fails you. It's not about failure, Elias countered, turning to face her. It's about finding solutions where others see only problems. We adapt, that's what makes us dangerous. Syra studied him carefully, her fiery eyes softening ever so slightly. Perhaps this human wasn't entirely foolish after all. Hours later, as the Wanderer drifted safely through open space, Elias decided it was time to explain himself more fully. Over a meal of rehydrated rations, which Sylar eyed suspiciously before reluctantly taking a bite, he shared his story. I grew up on Earth, Elias began, leaning back in his chair. Not much to tell, really. My family traded scrap metal for credits, barely scraping by, but I always wanted more, to explore, to make a difference. So I saved every credit I could, bought this old ship, and started traveling, and ended up buying an Amazari warrior. Salra interrupted, arching an eyebrow. That part wasn't exactly planned, Elias admitted with a wry grin. But I couldn't leave you there. Not when I knew I could do something about it. Syra leaned forward, her interest piqued. Why does it matter to you? Why risk yourself for a stranger? Elias paused, considering the question. Because no one deserves to lose their freedom, he said simply. And because sometimes doing the right thing is worth the risk. Syra fell silent, her thoughts swirling. She had spent her entire life believing in the supremacy of strength, the idea that might made right. Yet here was a human, physically weaker than nearly every species in the galaxy, proving that courage and conviction could be just as powerful. Her musings were interrupted by another alert. This time it came from the long-range scanner. A massive object loomed ahead, a derelict spaceship drifting silently through the void. Its hull was scorched and battered, clearly the victim of some ancient battle. What is that? Sylar asked, standing up to peer at the screen. I don't know, Elias replied, his curiosity piqued, but I think we're about to find out. Against Silra's protests, Elias piloted the Wanderer closer to the mysterious vessel. As they approached, the ship's sensors detected faint life signs emanating from within. Whoever or whatever was aboard, they weren't dead yet. This is reckless, Syra growled as Elias prepared to board the derelict ship. We don't know what's waiting for us. All the more reason to check it out, Elias said firmly. Besides, if there's someone in trouble, we can't just ignore them. Syra crossed her arms, exasperated but unwilling to back down. Fine, but if this goes badly, don't blame me. Together they suited up and entered the derelict ship via an airlock. Inside, the corridors were dark and eerily silent. The walls scarred by weapons fire, strange symbols etched into the metal hinted at an alien origin far older than either of them had encountered before. Suddenly, a low groan echoed through the ship, followed by the sound of movement. Elias froze, gripping his flashlight tightly. From the shadows emerged a figure tall, skeletal, and wrapped in tattered robes. Its hollow eyes locked onto them, and it raised a trembling hand. You must stop them, the creature rasped, its voice barely audible. The Harrow, they come. Before either Elias or Syra could respond, the creature collapsed, its body dissolving into dust. Shocked and confused, they exchanged uneasy glances. The Harrow, Syra murmured, frowning. What did it mean? Elias shook his head, his mind racing. I don't know, but I think we're about to find out. As they returned to the Wanderer, both were acutely aware that their lives had changed forever. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together and, perhaps, along the way, they would discover just how much humanity and strength could truly achieve when combined. Back aboard the Wanderer, Elias and Sylara sat in tense silence, the cryptic warning of the dying creature still echoing in their minds. The word Harrow lingered like a shadow over everything they did, though neither of them could decipher its meaning. All they knew was that it carried an ominous weight and, whatever it referred to, it wasn't something they wanted to face. Unprepared, Elias stared at the ship's navigation console, his fingers tapping nervously against the edge of the panel. We need answers, he said finally, breaking the quiet. If this harrow is coming for us or anyone else, we have to figure out what it means. Syra crossed her arms, leaning against the wall with her usual stoic demeanor masking her unease. You humans are strange, she muttered, always chasing knowledge, even when ignorance might keep you safer. And your people would charge headfirst into danger without understanding it. Elias shot back, raising an eyebrow. Better to act than cower, Syra replied sharply. But fine, what do you propose we do? Track the source of that ship, Elias nodded. Exactly, if we can trace where it came from, maybe we'll find clues about who or what the harrow is. But first, he turned to the scanner readouts, displayed on the screen. We need to analyze those symbols we saw inside. They might hold the key. For hours, Elias worked tirelessly, feeding images of the alien glyphs into the ship's rudimentary AI system. Syra watched him with growing curiosity, marveling at how focused he became when faced with a challenge. There was no hesitation, no fear, just determination etched into every line of his face. It reminded her of the resolve she'd seen among emissary warriors before battle. Finally, the AI processed the data and spat out fragments of translation. Most of it was garbled nonsense, but one phrase stood out. Asterisk, Guardians of the Void. Asterisk, what does that mean? Syra asked, peering over his shoulder. I'm not sure, Elias admitted, rubbing his temples. But if I had to guess, it sounds like some kind of ancient protectors or maybe conquerors. Either way, it doesn't sound friendly. Syra frowned deeply. Conquerors like the Keller patrols hunting me. Possibly worse, Elias murmured. Whoever the Guardians were, they left behind a warship full of weapons and warnings. That tells me they weren't messing around. Before they could delve deeper, another alarm blared through the ship. This time it wasn't enemy ships, it was an incoming transmission. A holographic projection flickered to life above the console, revealing a humanoid figure cloaked in shimmering blue robes. Its voice was calm but firm, carrying an authority that demanded attention. To whoever receives this message, the figure began, know that you now bear witness to the return of the harrow. Prepare yourselves, for balance must be restored. The transmission ended abruptly, leaving both Elias and Syra staring at the blank space where the image had been. Well, Elias said dryly, that clears things up. Syra clenched her fists, frustration boiling beneath her surface. Enough riddles, we need action. Tell me what you plan next, human. Elias hesitated, then pointed to the star map glowing faintly on the console. That derelict ship originated near a cluster called a Veil sector, an area notorious for being uncharted and dangerous. If we want answers, that's where we'll find them. And if we don't survive, Syra challenged, then at least we tried, Elias replied, meeting her gaze steadily. I didn't free you just so you could sit here waiting for trouble to find us. Let's take the fight to them instead. To his surprise, Syra smirked, a rare sign of approval. Fine, lead the way, merchant, but remember, I won't let you die easily. The journey to the Veil sector was anything but smooth. The region was a labyrinth of asteroid fields, radiation storms, and gravitational anomalies that tested even Elias's piloting skills. At one point, they narrowly avoided colliding with a massive meteorite, thanks only to Syra spotting it moments before impact. Her sharp reflexes saved them both, earning her a grateful nod from Elias. You're not half bad at this, he remarked as they steadied the ship. Maybe you should consider a career in space travel. I prefer solid ground, Syra retorted, though there was a hint of amusement in her tone. Over the past few days, their rapport had shifted subtly. While she still regarded him with skepticism, there was also a grudging respect forming between them, a bond forged in shared danger and mutual reliance. When they finally reached the coordinates of the derelict ship's origin, what they found defied belief. Suspended within a swirling nebula was a colossal structure, a ring-shaped construct larger than any planetoid, pulsating with dark energy. Its surface was covered in the same alien symbols they'd encountered earlier, glowing faintly as if alive. What is that thing? Syra whispered, her voice tinged with awe. I don't know, Elias admitted, his heart pounding, but I think it's calling us. Against all logic and despite Syra's protests, they decided to investigate further. As the wanderer approached the structure, a beam of light shot out, enveloping the ship and pulling it toward a docking bay. Inside, the air was thick with static electricity, and the walls hummed with latent power. Suddenly, figures emerged from the shadow, stalled skeletal beings identical to the one they'd encountered earlier. Their hollow eyes glowed faintly as they surrounded Elias and Syra, speaking in unison. The cycle nears completion, they intoned. The harrow awakens, you must choose. Join us, or perish. Syra stepped forward, her stance defiant. Tell us who you are and why we should care. One of the beings tilted its head, studying her intently. We are the remnants of the Guardians. Long ago we fought the harrow to preserve order. Now our strength wanes, and the harrow returns stronger than ever. Without aid, all will fall. Elias exchanged a glance with Syra. For once their thoughts aligned perfectly. Whatever lay ahead, they couldn't turn away, not when the fate of countless worlds hung in the balance. We'll help, Elias declared, his voice steady. But you'll have to trust us. The beings hesitated, then bowed low. So be it. Prepare yourselves, mortals. The battle for existence begins anew. As the chamber filled with light, Elias felt a surge of resolve. Humanity might be small and fragile compared to the vastness of the universe, but together, with courage and ingenuity, they could stand toe-to-toe with even the greatest threats. And perhaps, just perhaps, Syra was starting to see that too. Remnants of the Guardians led Elias and Syra deeper into the colossal ring structure, their skeletal forms gliding silently ahead like ghostly guides. The air grew colder with each step, and the hum of latent energy intensified, vibrating through the floor beneath their feet. Strange symbols etched into the walls pulsed faintly in rhythm, as if alive and aware of their presence. It was a place, both awe-inspiring and unnerving, a relic from an age long forgotten, now reawakened for reasons unknown. Elias's mind raced as he tried to piece together what little they had learned so far. The Harrow were coming, that much was clear, but who or what they truly were remained shrouded in mystery. The Guardians claimed they had fought them before, but their cryptic warnings offered no concrete answers. Were the Harrow conquerors, destroyers, or something even more insidious? Syra walked beside him, her expression unreadable but her body tense, ready for action at a moment's notice. She carried herself with the same unshakable confidence that defined her warrior spirit, yet there was something new in her demeanor, quiet curiosity, perhaps even a flicker of doubt. This wasn't just another battlefield. It was something far beyond anything she'd ever faced. Finally, the group arrived at a vast chamber illuminated by a swirling vortex of dark energy suspended in the center. The sight was mesmerizing yet terrifying, its chaotic currents twisting and writhing like living shadows. Around the vortex stood several pedestals, each holding artifacts glowing faintly with the same eerie light. "This is the Nexus," one of the Guardians explained, its hollow voice echoing through the chamber. "Here lies the key to defeating the Harrow or unleashing their full wrath upon the galaxy." Elias frowned, stepping closer to examine the artifacts. They looked ancient, their surfaces covered in intricate carvings and runes that seemed to shift when viewed too long. "What are these?" he asked cautiously. "The echoes of balance," came the reply. "Each contains a fragment of power once wielded by the Guardians to contain the Harrow, but using them requires sacrifice and unity." "Sacrifice?" Syra echoed sharply, her eyes narrowing. "Explain yourself." The Guardian hesitated, then turned its gaze toward her. "To activate the echoes, one must channel their life force into the Nexus. Only then can the balance be restored, but the cost may be fatal." A heavy silence fell over the room. Elias felt his stomach churn at the implications. Whoever volunteered would essentially be gambling their life to stop the Harrow, and given the stakes, failure wasn't an option. "I'll do it, said suddenly, her voice firm despite the weight of the decision. All eyes turned to her, including Elias's, who stared at her in stunned disbelief. "No," he said firmly, shaking his head. "You've already been through enough. I freed you. I'm not letting you throw your life away here." "And what will you do instead?" "Human," Syra shot back, her tone sharp but tinged with something softer, perhaps gratitude masked as defiance. "Die trying to prove some point about humanity." "It's not about proving anything," Elias countered, stepping closer until they were face to face. "It's about doing what needs to be done. You're stronger than me, yes, but this isn't just about strength. It's about working together. If we split up, neither of us stands a chance." For a moment, neither spoke. The tension between them crackled like static electricity, two wills clashing yet somehow finding common ground. Finally, Syra let out a low growl of frustration and stepped back. "Fine," she conceded grudgingly. "Then how do we proceed?" Elias glanced at the Guardians, who watched the exchange with silent approval. "We share the burden," he said decisively. "If activating the echoes requires life force, then we'll combine ours. Together, maybe we can amplify the effect without losing ourselves completely." The Guardians exchanged glances among themselves before nodding slowly. "An unorthodox approach," one admitted, "but it aligns with the principles of balance. Begin when ready." As Elias and Syra approached the Nexus, the atmosphere grew heavier, pressing down on them like an invisible weight. Each pedestal emitted a faint hum, drawing them closer. Without speaking, they placed their hands on opposite sides of the central console, their fingers brushing lightly against the cold metal surface. "Ready?" Elias asked quietly, glancing at Syra. She nodded once, her fiery eyes locking onto his. "Let's finish this." At first, nothing happened. Then, a surge of energy coursed through the chamber, lifting them off their feet as the artifacts began to glow brighter. Streams of light connected the pedestals, forming a web that encircled the vortex. Images flashed before their eyes, visions of battles fought across galaxies, civilizations rising and falling, and endless cycles of destruction and renewal. Through it all, Elias and Syra remained linked, their minds merging in ways neither could have anticipated. Memories surfaced. Elias relived moments from his childhood, scavenging scrap metal under the blazing sun of Earth, dreaming of stars he couldn't yet reach. Syra saw glimpses of her own past, training relentlessly in Keller's harsh terrain, driven by a desire to prove herself worthy of her people's legacy. In those fleeting seconds, they understood each other not just as allies but as individuals, shaped by struggles and dreams. What separated them, species strength, upbringing, faded away, replaced by a shared purpose that transcended everything else. Suddenly the vortex roared to life, pulling them toward its core. Pain seared through their bodies as their life forces intertwined with the nexus, feeding it the energy needed to awaken the echoes. Just as Elias thought he couldn't endure another moment, the pressure eased, and the chamber fell silent. When they opened their eyes, the artifacts were glowing steadily, pulsating in harmony with the vortex. The Guardians bowed deeply, their voices resonant with gratitude. "You have succeeded where others failed," one intoned. "The Harrow will come, but now the galaxy has a fighting chance." Elias and Syra exchanged exhausted smiles, leaning on each other for support. For the first time, Syra allowed herself to acknowledge what she'd known deep down since meeting Elias, that humanity's greatest strength wasn't physical prowess or technological superiority, but its capacity for connection, empathy, and resilience. Outside the chamber, the ring structure began to hum louder, signaling the activation of defenses long dormant. Somewhere in the distance, a faint rumble echoed, a harbinger of the battle to come. "We did it," Elias whispered hoarsely, looking at Syra. "Now comes the hard part." Her lips curved into a rare smile, fierce and determined. "Then, let's show the Harrow why they should fear us." As they prepared to leave the Nexus united in purpose and resolve, the galaxy braced itself for the storm ahead. Whatever challenges awaited, Elias and Syra were ready, and together they had become something greater than either could have imagined alone. The journey back to the Wanderer felt like walking through a dream, or perhaps a nightmare. Elias and Syra moved in silence, their bodies still tingling with residual energy from the Nexus. The activation of the echoes had drained them both physically and mentally, but there was no time to rest. The Guardians' warnings echoed in their minds. The Harrow were coming, and they would not wait. As they stepped aboard the ship, the tension in the air was palpable. The once familiar hum of the engines now seemed ominous, as if even the vessel sensed the impending danger. Elias took his place at the controls, his hands steady despite the exhaustion weighing him down. Syra stood nearby, her arms crossed, and her gaze fixed on the viewport, scanning the void for any sign of movement. "What happens now?" she asked finally, breaking the silence. Elias exhaled slowly, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "We wait," he said grimly, "and prepare." Activating the echoes was just the first step. The Guardian said it would weaken the Harrow's advance, but we'll still need to fight. Syra nodded, though her expression remained troubled. "You humans, you never stop surprising me. Even when faced with something this vast, you keep pushing forward." "It's not about being brave," Elias replied quietly, glancing at her. "It's about knowing that doing nothing is worse than trying, even if failure seems inevitable." Before Syra could respond, the ship's sensors blared to life. A massive object appeared on the edge of the nebula fleet of ships, unlike anything either of them had ever seen. Their hulls shimmered with an otherworldly blackness, absorbing light rather than reflecting it. They moved in perfect formation, exuding an aura of menace that sent chills down Elias's spine. "The Harrow," Syra whispered, her voice tight with barely contained fury. "They're faster than I expected," Elias muttered frantically, adjusting the scanners to gather more data. "But look, there's a pattern to their movements. If we can disrupt it." "How?" Syra demanded, stepping closer to the console. "Your little tricks won't work against them." "Not alone, no," Elias admitted. He tapped rapidly on the screen, pulling up a map of the surrounding. "There is, and remember what the Guardians told us, the echoes create balance. If we can lure the Harrow into the ring structure, maybe we can trap them inside and use the Nexus to seal them away permanently." Syra frowned, considering the plan. "That's assuming we survive long enough to get close." "We've come this far," Elias said firmly, meeting her gaze. "I'm not giving up now." With that, he plotted a course toward the Harrow fleet, piloting the Wanderer directly into the heart of danger. As they approached, the enemy ships turned their attention to the tiny vessel, firing beams of dark energy that narrowly missed the hull. Each shot rocked the ship violently, forcing Elias to swerve erratically to avoid destruction. "You're insane," Syra shouted over the chaos, gripping the edge of the console for support. "Maybe," Elias yelled back, his focus unwavering. "But it's working." True enough, the Harrow ships began to follow, drawn by the bait Elias had set. Using every ounce of skill and ingenuity, he maneuvered the Wanderer through the asteroid field surrounding the ring structure, leading the pursuing fleet into the labyrinth of debris. Several Harrow vessels collided with rocks or fell behind, thinning their numbers significantly. Finally, they reached the entrance to the ring. Elias slammed the thrusters into full power, guiding the ship through the narrow opening just as the Harrow closed in behind them. Inside, the environment shifted. Dramatically, the walls pulsed with energy, and the air crackled with static electricity. "Now comes the hard part," Elias said. Turning to Syra, "We have to activate the Nexus again, but this time, we need to hold it open long enough for the Harrow to enter. Then we seal them inside. And if we fail," Syra asked bluntly, "then we die trying," Elias replied without hesitation. They hurried to the chamber housing the Nexus, where the artifact still glowed faintly. As soon as they touched the console, the vortex roared to life once more, its chaotic currents swirling wildly. Outside, the Harrow ships poured into the structure, their forms dissolving into shadowy tendrils as they merged with the vortex. Elias and Scylla braced themselves, channeling their combined strength into maintaining the connection. Pain surged through their bodies, more intense than before, as the Nexus fought to contain the overwhelming force of the Harrow. Through gritted teeth, Elias glanced at Scylla, who met his gaze with unyielding determination. "We can do this," he gasped, his voice strained but resolute. "Forget your speeches." Human Scylla growled, though there was a hint of amusement in her tone. "Just don't let go." Together they pushed harder, pouring every ounce of willpower into the task. The chamber shook violently, threatening to collapse under the strain. Just when it seemed they couldn't hold on any longer, the vortex began to stabilize, pulling the Harrow deeper into its core. "One last push," Elias shouted, summoning every reserve of strength he had left, with a final surge of energy. The Nexus sealed shut, trapping the Harrow within its depths. The chamber fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting instantly. Exhausted, Elias and Scylla collapsed to the floor, breathing heavily. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Scylla let out a low chuckle, shaking her head. "You humans really are something else." Elias managed a weak smile, leaning back against the wall. "Told you we'd make a good team." Outside, the ring structure began to glow brighter, its defenses fully activated. The Harrow were gone for now, but as Elias and Scylla caught their breath, they knew the galaxy wasn't safe yet. This victory was only temporary still. They had proven something important, not just to themselves but to the universe itself. Humanity's strength lay not in brute force but in unity, creativity, and sheer stubbornness. And alongside an Amazari warrior who had once been enslaved, Elias Drake had forever changed the destiny of two souls and perhaps countless others. That as the Wanderer drifted away from the ring, the stars ahead shimmered with renewed hope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The aftermath of sealing the Nexus left Elias and Scylla battered but alive. Their bodies ached, their muscles trembling from the strain of channeling so much energy into the echoes. Yet, even in their exhaustion, there was an undeniable sense of triumph, a shared understanding that they had accomplished something extraordinary. As the Wanderer drifted away from the ring structure, the vastness of space stretched before them like an endless canvas. The Harrow were trapped for now, but the cost of victory weighed heavily on both of them. They had faced death head-on and emerged victorious, but the scars, both visible and invisible, remained. Elias leaned back in his chair, staring at the star-speckled viewport. His mind replayed every moment of the battle, the terror of being pursued by the Harrow fleet, the pain of activating the Nexus, and the sheer willpower it took to hold on until the very end. He glanced over at Scylla, who sat across the cabin, her arms crossed and her expression unreadable. Despite her warrior stoicism, he could see the flicker of vulnerability in her eyes. "You okay?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. Scylla looked up, startled by the question. For a brief moment she hesitated, then let out a low sigh. "I've fought many battles in my life," she admitted, her voice quieter than usual, "but none like this." It wasn't just about strength, it was about trust. Elias nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "Yeah, I get that. Trust isn't easy, especially when you're working with someone completely different from yourself." A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of Scylla's lips. "You humans are strange creatures, fragile, yet unyielding, weak, yet capable of feats no Amazari would dare attempt." "It's not about being weak or strong," Elias replied thoughtfully. "It's about knowing when to rely on others, when to push yourself beyond your limits. That's what makes us dangerous." Scylla tilted her head slightly, studying him with newfound respect. "Perhaps that is why the Guardians chose us, not because we are perfect, but because we are willing to fight despite our flaws." Before either of them could say more, the ship's sensors blared again. This time, however, the alert was different, not a threat, but a message. A faint transmission crackled through the speakers, distorted but intelligible. To those who have awakened the echoes, came a deep, resonant voice. "Know that your actions have altered the balance of the galaxy. The Harrow may be contained, but their influence lingers. You must continue to stand as guardians of unity." "The Guardians again," Elias murmured, leaning forward to listen. Intently, "they're still watching." "They speak wisely," Scylla added, rising to her feet. "If the Harrow remain a threat, then so too must we. We cannot simply walk away." Elias stood as well, determination hardening his features. "You're right. Whatever happens next, we'll face it together. But first," he turned toward the navigation console, pulling up a map of nearby star systems. "We need allies. Humans alone can't handle this kind of danger, and neither can the Amazari. If we're going to protect the galaxy, we'll need help from other species." Scylla raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his suggestion. "You think others will join us after everything?" "I do," Elias said firmly, "because if there's one thing I've learned, It's that people, no matter their species, will rise to the occasion when it matters most. All they need is hope, and someone to lead them. Over the next several days, Elias and Syra traveled to various worlds, spreading word of their encounter with the Harrow and rallying support for a united front. At first, their efforts met resistance. Many species dismissed them outright, skeptical of two unlikely heroes claiming to save the galaxy. Others were hesitant, fearing retaliation from the Harrow if they aligned themselves with such a cause, but slowly, things began to change. On one planet, a group of engineers offered to retrofit the Wanderer with advanced weaponry and shielding. Impressed by Ilias's ingenuity, on another, a council of diplomats pledged resources and manpower after hearing Syra recount her transformation from slave to warrior. Even former enemies of the Amazari agreed to set aside old grudges, inspired by the story of a human who dared to free an enslaved warrior. Through it all, Elias and Syra grew closer, their bond strengthened by shared purpose. Syra marveled at Ilias's ability to inspire trust and cooperation, while Elias admired Syra's unwavering resolve and leadership. Together, they became a symbol of unity, proof that differences could be bridged when the stakes were high enough. Finally, the day came when representatives from dozens of species gathered aboard a massive diplomatic station orbiting a neutral moon. The room buzzed with anticipation as Elias stepped forward to address the crowd, Syra standing tall beside him. "We stand here today not as individuals, but as a coalition united by a common goal," Elias began, his voice steady and commanding. "The Harrow are real, and their return threatens every corner of this galaxy. But we are stronger together than apart. Each of us brings something unique to the fight: strength, intelligence, courage. And together, we can ensure that no species ever falls prey to tyranny again." Applause erupted throughout the chamber, echoing like thunder. Species that had once been divided now stood side by side, ready to defend their shared future. As Elias and Syra exchanged a glance, they knew they had achieved something remarkable: not just victory over the Harrow, but a new era of collaboration and peace. In that moment, the galaxy saw humanity and the Amazari in a new light. No longer underestimated or ignored, they were recognized as forces to be reckoned with. And as the Wanderer departed the station, its course set for unknown horizons, Elias couldn't help but feel a swell of pride. "Looks like we started something big," he said to Syra, smiling despite his weariness. She smirked, crossing her arms. "Indeed, just don't let it go to your head, human." As the stars blurred past the viewport, Elias knew one thing for certain: the journey was far from over. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them as equals to warriors bound by destiny and driven by hope. And somewhere, deep within the Nexus, the echoes pulsed faintly, a reminder that balance had been restored for now. The galaxy was quiet, deceptively so. The Harrow were contained within the Nexus, their shadowy tendrils locked away from the worlds they sought to consume. Yet, Elias and Syra knew better than to believe that danger had truly passed. The echoes of balance pulsed faintly in the vastness of space, a constant reminder that peace was fragile and vigilance essential. Months had passed since the coalition formed, and already its impact rippled across star systems. Trade routes once plagued by piracy reopened under mutual protection agreements. Planets previously isolated or at odds began sharing resources, technology, and knowledge. For the first time in centuries, hope replaced fear as the dominant force, shaping interstellar relations. Elias stood on the observation deck of the Wanderer, gazing out at the swirling nebulae beyond the viewport. His reflection shimmered faintly in the glass, a weary but content face, marked by lines of determination and wisdom earned through trial. Beside him, Syra leaned against the railing, her arms crossed as she watched the same stars with quiet introspection. "You've changed everything," Syra said finally, breaking the silence. Her tone wasn't accusatory, it carried a note of admiration, tinged with something deeper. "Not just for humans, but for all of us." Elias chuckled softly, shaking his head. "I didn't do it alone. You were there every step of the way." "True," Syra admitted, her fiery eyes meeting his. "But you started it. A merchant from Earth, a species most dismissed as irrelevant, proved them wrong. Humanity isn't weak, Elias, it's relentless." He smiled wryly, leaning back against the railing. "Relentless, huh? I'll take that as a compliment." "It is one," she replied, her lips curving into a rare smile. "You showed me and everyone else that strength isn't always measured in muscles or weapons. Sometimes, it's about refusing to give up, even when the odds seem impossible." For a moment, neither spoke. The hum of the ship's engines filled the air, blending with the soft glow of distant stars. Both of them understood that this journey, that transformed them not just as individuals, but as symbols of unity and resilience. Later that evening, Elias found himself tinkering with the navigation console, making adjustments for their next destination. Though the immediate threat of the Harrow had been neutralized, he knew there were still countless challenges ahead. The galaxy was vast, unpredictable, and full of mysteries waiting to be unraveled as he worked. Syra approached silently, her footsteps muffled by the ship's metallic floor. She placed a hand on his shoulder, drawing his attention. "What now?" she asked simply, her voice steady yet tinged with curiosity. Elias straightened, turning to face her. Now, we keep moving forward. There's always another problem too, to solve, another world to help. We can't stop fighting for what's right, not while there are people who need protecting. Sylara nodded slowly, her expression thoughtful. And after that, Elias hesitated, a faint grin spreading across his face. Who knows? Maybe we'll find a planet where neither of us has to fight anymore. Somewhere peaceful, a place we can call home. To his surprise, Syra laughed, a rich, hearty sound that echoed through the cabin. Home? You think either of us would last long without trouble finding us? Maybe not, Elias conceded, laughing along with her. But it's nice to dream, isn't it? Days turned into weeks as the Wanderer continued its journey, carrying its crew toward new horizons. Along the way, stories of their exploits spread far and wide. Humans, once mocked as insignificant, were now respected for their ingenuity and courage. The Amazari feared for their ferocity. Were seen in a new light thanks largely to Sabua, whose transformation from enslaved warrior to galactic leader inspired millions. On one particularly clear night, Elias and Sylara stepped outside onto a small moon orbiting an uncharted planet. The sky above them glittered with countless stars, each one representing a world touched by their actions. They sat together in silence, taking in the beauty of the cosmos. Do you ever wonder if we're ready for all this? Elias asked quietly, gesturing toward the endless expanse. All the time, Sylara replied honestly. But readiness isn't the point. What matters is that we try even when failure seems inevitable. Elias nodded, feeling a sense of calm wash over him. He glanced at Sylara, her silhouette framed by the brilliance of the stars. In that moment he realized how much they had grown together and apart. Their bond transcended species, forged in fire and tempered by shared purpose. Finally, Elias broke the silence with a question. Do you regret any of it? Syra looked at him, her fiery eyes gleaming with resolve. No, she said firmly. Every choice led me here to this moment, with you. And for the first time in my life, I feel free. Her words hung in the air, simple yet profound. Free not just from chains, but from doubt, fear, and limitations. Together, they had defied expectations, challenged fate, and rewritten destinies. As they rose to return to the ship, Elias paused, looking back at the stars one last time. You know, he said, his voice filled with quiet pride. Humanity gets a bad rap sometimes, but deep down we're not so different from anyone else. We're flawed, sure, but we're also capable of incredible things when we work together. And stubborn, Syra added with a smirk. Don't forget stubborn. Elias laughed, shaking his head. Yeah, that too. With that, they climbed aboard the Wanderer, setting a course for the unknown. Behind them, the galaxy thrummed with newfound energy, united by the efforts of two unlikely heroes. Ahead lay countless adventures, dangers, and opportunities to make a difference. In the end, it wasn't about being perfect. It was about trying, failing, and trying again, because even the smallest spark could ignite change. And as long as Elias, Drake, and Syra sailed among the stars, humanity and the spirit of hope would shine brightly, reminding the universe that no matter the odds, courage and unity could overcome anything. The final words spoken aboard the ship that night summed it all up perfectly.